Abbott has said that the federal government has broken the pact between the United States federal government and the states. Governor Abbott says President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them. The result is a humanitarian crisis unlike anything we've seen before, smashing records for illegal immigration. Since President Biden took office, more than 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed Texas' southern border in just 3 years. That's more than the population of 33 different states in this country. And what about our Vice President, Kamala Harris? Did you know she's our country's immigration czar? Guess how many times she's been to the border? Once.
They tell me that between 2010 and 2020, they had about 11 to 1,500 Chinese come across the border. And in the first 11 months of 2023, they had about 33,000 come across the border. If they are sending people over here that are military aged with an agenda, would we be naive to think that if we've let that many in, that they couldn't spread out across the country and in some coordinated effort attack the energy grid here on a given day and create havoc? Of course they could.
Of course they could. All right, guys, so we got to talk about based Dr. Phil, okay? Because lately he's been super based, and it seems like he is on the verge of starting a new network that he claims is going to be neutral, okay? He's going to ask open-ended questions about the most pressing issues that we're facing in our country in a way that doesn't have spin, right? This is what he says. We'll see how that goes. But he's on a media tour, okay? Recently, he was on Joe Rogan, in which he discussed a lot of issues, like, for example, when it comes to the border. What you guys just saw at the beginning of this video was Dr. Phil ringing the alarm on what is happening at the border. Now, some people may claim that Dr. Phil is right-wing. He's a conspiracy theorist because he is basically telling the truth about the threat that is posed by the open border policies of the Biden administration. He specifically calls out Kamala Harris as the border czar, who apparently has gone mission in action. Okay, nobody knows where Kamala Harris is or what her take is on the border, what she's doing, even though she's supposed to be in charge of the border. Okay, I mean, it's really funny to me because Kamala Harris, you can, I guess, put the blame on her for what has happened at the border since Biden made her in charge. Okay, I think that, quite honestly, we should consider impeaching her for going missing on the border. Okay, I know that Mayorkas is going through it in Congress, but really we should be considering going after her because she's the person that I believe is the most responsible, okay, as the border czar. Okay, so he's asking the questions that we really should be asking about what's happening at the border, but he's also asking other questions about what is happening to our children, okay, the children of this country, okay, and that is, I guess, a part of his new book that he went on The View to promote, in which he actually upset The View because he basically went off on this rant about how Democrats shut down schools during COVID and how that had a negative effect on the development of children in multiple ways. And again, this upset The View because this is an anti-Democrat talking point, and you know how they can't stand to hear that on their show. So I want to talk about it, but before we get into it, I have to give a disclaimer, okay? Because I don't want to get a medical misinformation strike here. I don't want YouTube to think that I'm saying anything that I'm not saying or that Dr. Phil is saying anything that he's not saying. So I got to give you guys some context, okay? What Dr. Phil is talking about is how children during the pandemic were significantly less likely to die from COVID-19 than any other age group. Less than 1% of all deaths since the start of the pandemic have been those younger than the age of 18, according to federal data, okay? And what Dr. Phil is saying is that the policies that we implemented in regards to shutting down schools did not really make sense considering the fact that children seem to be less likely to die from the virus than any other age group. And this fact seemed to upset the cackling hens. And I want to talk about it, but before we get into it, we have to have a word from the sponsor of this video, BioTrust. If the appearance of wrinkles, fine lines, and other signs of aging on your face and body are getting worse, it may just be more than New Year's stress. Wrinkles and other typical marks of aging are one of the biggest signs that your collagen levels are getting detrimentally low. It becomes more crucial with each passing year to get more collagen in your diet in order to save your skin, which is why myself and thousands of other people are starting to use multi-collagen to renew and revitalize the way you look and feel. This collagen uniquely provides your body 5 different types of collagen from 4 different food sources, whereas most other collagen supplements only provide 2. It is formulated to reduce visible signs of aging, reduce wrinkles, promote a youthful glow, promote elasticity, and skin hydration. You can experience the incredible benefits of multi-collagen at a 53% discount. Plus, receive free live health and fitness coaching for life, a new ebook titled The 14 Foods for Amazing Skin, a 60-day satisfaction guarantee, and free shipping. Order now by going to healthwithpatriot.com. Again, that is healthwithpatriot.com.
Got it. Well, Dr. Phil, I want to make sure we get to your new book, which is We've Got Issues. And a lot, you were referring to it in the last segment, how much has changed since you first got started in this. And one of the things is social media. So you say you're not the only voice in your kids' ears, so you have to be the best voice. Explain that.
Well, think about it. In like 08, 09, smartphones came on, and kids they stopped living their lives and started watching people live their lives. And so we saw the biggest spike and the highest levels of depression, anxiety, loneliness, and suicidality since records have ever been kept. And it's just continued on and on and on. And then COVID hits 10 years later, and the same agencies that knew that are the agencies that shut down the schools for 2 years. Who does that? Who takes away the support system for these children? Who takes them away and shuts it down? And by the way, when they shut it down, they stopped the mandated reporters from being able to see children that were being abused and sexually molested, and in fact sent them home and abandoned them to their abusers with no way to watch, and referrals dropped 50 to 60%. So
there was also a pandemic going on, and they were trying to save kids' lives.
Remember, we know a lot of folks who died during this. So it wasn't, people weren't laying around eating bond, but, well, you know what? We're lucky. Maybe we're lucky they didn't, because we kept them out of the places that they could be sick, because no one wanted to believe we had an issue.
Are you saying no school children died of COVID?
I'm saying it was the safest group. They were the less vulnerable group, and they suffered and will suffer more from the mismanagement of COVID than they will from the exposure to COVID. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact.
Well, Phil, we don't even have time to talk it out now, man. But thanks for coming. The new book is called We've Got Issues, and it is out tomorrow.
Yeah, so I want you guys to understand, just to be clear, yes, children did die during the pandemic from COVID-19, okay? That did happen. However, Dr. Phil's point is that children were significantly less likely to die from COVID-19 than any other age group. Because again, less than 1% of all deaths since the start of the pandemic were among those younger than 18. And Dr. Phil is saying because of this, the policy of shutting down the schools, okay, actually was not justified, okay, considering what we knew at the time about the virus and how it affects people based off your age group, okay? Despite the facts that we knew, Democrats decided to shut down schools and force kids to do remote learning, which Dr. Phil argues was harmful to the development of children, particularly when it comes to their education and mental health, okay? In fact, several studies conducted post-pandemic found that shutting down schools and forcing kids into remote learning was, in fact, harmful to their education and mental health. The Department of Education published a report in 2022 that found that students' reading and math scores had plummeted. Quote, average scores for age 9 students in 2022 declined 5 points in reading and 7 points in mathematics compared to 2020. The Department of Education found this is the largest average score decline in reading since 1990 and the first ever score decline in mathematics, the DOE report read. So again, what Dr. Phil is arguing is that the long-lasting effects of school closures and lockdowns are going to affect millions of children forever, in which I 100% agree, okay? I think that it set back our children in multiple ways that we probably will never recover from, at least not in this generation. We're not going to recover from. I think that kids in this country were already struggling when it comes to education, and the pandemic really just made it a whole lot worse, okay? And Democrats, from an electoral standpoint, in my opinion, have not suffered the consequences of this terrible policy, okay? Because while Republicans were advocating to open the country back up and to send kids back to school, Democrats, who were paid off by the teachers' unions, were advocating to keep kids at home, remote learning, even though we knew that the risk or the negatives outweighed the benefits, okay? And Democrats, again, continue with this bad policy that, again, arguably has negatively affected children, and it will do so for generations. And this is not the only issue that Dr. Phil is speaking out about when it comes to children. Dr. Phil also is speaking out about gender ideology and the effect that that is having on children, because children are being exposed to this in school. And unfortunately, he was not able to talk with the cackling hens about this subject. I really wish that he did. Okay, that definitely would have pissed him off. But he did go on Joe Rogan and talk about the issue, and I do think it's worth playing this clip because Dr. Phil is pushing back on the woke agenda and also talking about a subject that the liberal media refuses to talk about in an honest way. Take a look.
It's interesting they choose words like gender affirming care. You know, that's interesting that they call it that, but really what they're talking about is hormonal therapy or sex reassignment surgery on children. And in fairness, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Endocrine Society, or whatever the exact name of that is, all of the major medical associations have signed off on this, Joe. They've signed off on it. And I have never seen those organizations sign off on anything with less information as to whether or not it does long-term harm of anything in my life. And when I ask about that, when I bring that up, then they immediately label you as transphobic. And I thought that the deal was first do no harm. And all of the European countries, you know, Sweden, Norway, they've all stopped doing it because they say, we cannot say in good conscience that this does no harm, because it does harm. If you look at the long-term consequences, if someone changes their mind at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, they can't decide which pajamas they want to wear at night. And their reason for doing it is it stops this drive for suicide, that there's a suicide epidemic. It doesn't fix that. It doesn't fix all the comorbid issues that come along with feeling like they're in the wrong body. But yet they're pushing this, and we're going to do some shows that are already taped that are revealing what the real results of this are. And I think people are going to be shocked that these medical organizations have signed off on this. I think they've just given in to the pressure.
Yeah, I just don't understand where the pressure is coming from. Another phrase they're using now is life-saving gender-affirming care. They like to smash them all together like that.
Well, I don't think
it's gaslighting.
Yeah, it is gaslighting. That's exactly what it is. And what it's about is it's about money, okay? This is a new industry, and it's unfortunate because this is the dark side of capitalism, especially when you talk about medical or pharmaceutical capitalism, in the sense that, yeah, I mean, if you put these kids on hormones and drugs and put them through surgeries and stuff like that, they're going to be on medications and they're going to be a part of the system for the rest of their lives, okay? And that is hundreds of thousands of dollars per child, per patient that is undergoing a gender transition. I mean, this is a lifetime's worth of income for the medical field, and this is why they're doing it, right? This is why all of these, medical institutions are getting on board with this, right? It's not about the science, okay? Because if it was about the science, they wouldn't all be hopping on board with this, despite the fact that you have universities and medical institutions in other countries saying, no, the science on this is not clear, right? This is not cut and dry, right? But the fact that you have the American medical institution saying that this is cut and dry tells you that it's an agenda, right? When this hasn't even been around long enough for us to study and to come to a solid conclusion on whether or not it's safe or does it even make sense to put children through this type of stuff. But they're doing it anyways because they know that there's a potentially large market. There's a potentially a large amount of money that can be made off of this, okay? And, you know, we need people like Dr. Phil because Dr. Phil had a show on the mainstream liberal media in which, you know, when his show was ending, his show decided to become more and more based, okay? It's unfortunate that it has ended because, man, it was pretty based towards the end, but it looks like he's coming out with a new show in which he's going to talk honestly and openly about these issues, okay? And it is definitely a good thing to have somebody like him to join in on a discussion because you can't just dismiss him as some right-wing lunatic because I don't think that he is, right? I think that Dr. Phil is somebody that seems to me to be pretty neutral. He seems to be a critical thinker, and his opinion seems to fall in line with what he sees as the facts, right? Which is not something that you see too much in the mainstream liberal media. Again, this is why you have shows like The View who don't care about the facts. They don't care about the evidence. All they care about is the narrative. Dr. Phil clearly doesn't care about the narrative, and he's coming out and he's pushing back against the narrative, okay? And he should be protected at all costs because we all know what happens, you know, when you turn against the narrative, especially, again, if you're a part of that whole industry, which he is, once you start pushing back against the narrative, the woke powers that be don't really like it too much, right? All types of allegations and crazy stuff start to come out against you when you start to push back, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if Dr. Phil has some skeletons pulled out of his closet, you know, now that he is openly pushing back against the leftist agenda on multiple issues, right? Like the border, like, you know, Democrats and their pandemic policies, COVID, when it comes to, you know, this gender issue and kids. Again, this is not stuff that the mainstream liberal media and the woke powers that be want people like Dr. Phil to be talking about and openly discussing, especially considering how he's pushing back against the narrative. So Dr. Phil must be protected at all costs. I'm glad he's speaking out about it. I'm glad that, you know, he wrote his book and that he's bringing these issues to the forefront, especially when it comes to the issues that our children are dealing with. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.